जला दे जला दे।
As we know, Mr. J.S. Rajput, he is former director of NCERT. He is educationist and writer also. He has published many articles and books on physics and education. UNESCO honored him with Jan Amos Comenius Medal in 2004 for his contributions to educational reforms in India. You have introduced 2-year B.Ed course. He received Maharishi Ved Vyas Award from Madhya Pradesh government in 2010. The government of India awarded him the 4th highest civilian honor of the Padam Shri in 2015 for his contributions to literature and education. We are proud of you, sir. Today you are with us, and one thing I should be add that you have visited Gujarat Vidyapith several times. When Professor Ramlal Bhai Parikh was Vice Chancellor and Chancellor, he was very much a friend of J.S. Rajput, and we have heard him many times in the Gujarat Vidyapith. So I introduced already J.S. Rajput. Just now I am introducing our second speaker, Mr. Arun Kumar. He is pre-joined JNU in 1984 and retired as the Sukhmay Chakravarti Chair Professor in 2015. Currently, he is the Malcolm Adishesh Chair Professor in the Institute of Social Sciences. He has had many assignments in many foreign universities such as Columbia University, Congress Mellon University, UNAM Mexico University. UNAM University awarded him. His famous book is Challenges Facing Indian University. Second one is Demonetization and the Black Economy. He has written several books. He has been holding several key positions in the Indian government, and we welcome sir you. And I invite Mr. Dayanand Tandon, please come here and say a few sentences about this topic. Please, Dayanand Tandon.
Good morning, friends. Good morning, and welcome the directors of the GSDP. I'm really thankful to Kas, Mendaben, and Mayank Bhai to give me this opportunity to be a moderator in this session. Though I am not an educationist, and I will be sandwiched today between two prominent educationists and well-known persons. Like health, which is the first session that we had this morning, education has also, I shouldn't use the word taken a beating, but in the last 2 years, it has seen a major paradigm shift, which has been quite good, quite positive. But at the same time, we still have to assess and evaluate from the qualitative perspective of education. If we see, I mean, I was just glancing through one of the UNICEF report yesterday, and it says that 1.6 billion children, 1.6 billion children from 190 countries could not get education in the COVID-19 period. 94% of the students were affected, and 99% from the lower and middle class. More or less a similar situation in our country as well. But there's another perception to this. When getting into a crowd and the pandemic and the virus spread, we have to keep our next generation safe. Life is more important. Education is equally important, but life of the dearest children is most important. And this challenge gives us all an opportunity to look for alternatives. What and how can we really impart education? And within that framework, how can we get qualitative inputs? We have experienced this with hiccups in the initial stages. If you look at it from the private and public school perspective, big losses to the corporate schools. But at the same time, we have to weigh what was more important, life of our children or education, and how to maintain the balance. So with the policies that the government, the state governments and the central government endorsed, the policy definitely was more skewed towards keeping the children safe at home and everybody. That was the first slogan in the COVID-19. Stay safe, keep safe. Then the others, keep distance, keep social distance. So within the family, that was the most important. Now, how to impart quality education and what were the limitations and challenges at that time? We have seen that the infrastructure was not fully equipped to really take this challenge, particularly from the government education system. But coming to the, why I'm saying government and private again and again, because you can see that there are privileged classes in education as well, and they have access to certain technology, whereas the others do not. So that is why 94% of the children could not, or 99% of the lower and the middle class who could not afford a mobile or Android phone were deprived initially, but later on they picked up. So the two speakers that we have today and the director, but I would welcome Mr. Arun Kumar first to take the floor and give us an insight into how the quality education was affected and how it could be, if we carry on with the same, if we carry on with the same trend, and that is what we are seeing, very few schools opening, then in that case, what would be what would be your message to the educationist, policy makers, and where we would start? So thank you very much. I won't take much time, and I would request Mr. Arun Kumar to please give us your insight on the qualitative education processes and the past that we have experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. I have a slide, so I'll try and share the screen. So, am I allowed to? Yeah, okay.
You can share the screen,
yeah.
Dr. Arun. How are you?
Yes.
And Vijay,
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Okay.
Just, I would like to say as a moderator, there is always a time limit. So we'll stick to 20-minute presentation for this. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'll be presenting is the imperatives for achieving quality education in India. So this is actually broader than what the pandemic situation is. And I was told that I should make a 35-minute presentation, but I'll try and cut it down. So I'll sort of move quickly from the slides. So basically, I've been, in the field of education for the last 50 years. My parents are also educationists. So I've seen through their eyes, the problems of quality of education. Now, what is education all about? It is about absorbing and generating socially relevant knowledge, and I think the socially relevant part of knowledge generation is very important. So in my Indian economy book, I've discussed, this extensively. And then the other thing is that the context in which we discuss quality in education also has to be the socially relevant aspect. Without that, I don't think we can discuss what is quality. And even though my focus will be, because I've been in higher education all my life, my focus would be based on higher education, but all levels of education are intertwined, whether it be primary, secondary, and tertiary. So what I say for higher education and for school education will be intertwined. Now, next, you see the social role is very, very important. For instance, I was doing rural development in Hoshangabad district between my physics PhD and my economics PhD. And there the landlord used to tell us, why are you educating the children of the poor? Because then who'll do my garadiya ka job? Who'll give me free labor? Similarly, under capitalism, capital wants trained labor, but it wants docile labor. It doesn't want labor to protest. So, education is supposed to give training, but also keep them docile. Now, is there a contradiction in this? That once you give education, what you do is you give an understanding of life, you give an understanding of the situation. So, the way it is handled is that you divert attention to emotional issues, to short-term issues. And, now in the recent past, consumerism has become the new opium of the masses, and consumerism has been spread in a major way to divert attention from the real issues. So diversion to spirituality, to religion, to karma of past actions, and the idea that we are getting what we deserve. These are some of the ways in which to keep labor docile, but it has an impact on our education also. It also has an impact on social aspects of our education. So the social advancement requires conscious individuals with a scientific temper. And these are the two things that I find that in the Indian context that have been greatly weakened. Education can reproduce the existing systems of inequality and social thinking, but education can also help break out of this limitation. In 2007-8 in JNU, we had this incident where the students, caught hold of the muster rolls of the, contractors who were getting work done, and they found that the contractors were paying half the wage that actually was the wage that was fixed by the government. So there was an agitation, and the rector said that, JNU cannot be different from Munirka. So what's happening outside the university also has to happen within the university. And there's a lot of protest about it, because we believe that actually the academics are supposed to give leadership and break out of the mold of the existing systems and try and, improve matters rather than say that, what's outside is what will be the way the university will be. So we need to build capability amongst people, how they can think for themselves. That capability is very important. And when we teach the students to think for themselves, then they will rebel. They will actually question. And that's the way to understand the world around themselves. So for this, there's a critical role in universities of autonomy and accountability. Now, autonomy and accountability are very often used, bandied as, buzzwords, without the content. So in 1987, I wrote a piece in Economic and Political Weekly arguing that autonomy and accountability are interlinked. Accountability of higher education has to be to the long-term interest of society. And that can only be given by people who are autonomous, who can, think and critique the existing knowledge. Without that, you cannot have accountability to the long-term interest of society. I'll get back to this a little later if there are questions, but autonomy and accountability in higher education are very, very crucial. Without that, socially relevant knowledge generation becomes very difficult. Now, let's see what is quality in education. Quality in education is not an abstraction. We very often think of it as abstract thing and, maybe propose thing. It has to be based on the social context, like within a feudal system or a capitalist system, what is quality would be largely very different. And if we want to make an egalitarian society, then again, the quality would have very different connotation. Quantity is very important as well, but quality is very equally so. So our focus in the recent past in the education policy has been on quantity. We are increasing the enrollment at every level, but quality has suffered a great deal. And why I say that is because it's my experience that we can give 100 lectures and they will be indifferent. And if they're indifferent, then the creativity of the children is killed because they lose interest in the subject. And that's what happens a lot in our classrooms, where the lectures are very indifferent. Children don't have much interest and they bunk classes and they simply mug up and pass. Similarly, large amount of research is also based on paper chase. It doesn't build understanding. So, in JNU, we saw that, to get PhD done was proving to be rather difficult because students would simply want to copy and do the PhD. And JNU PhDs are much better than in a large number of other universities. So if this is a situation in JNU, you can imagine what it would be elsewhere. And post 2005, with the new policy that came, what happened was that, a lot of fake journals and so on came. You also had, a lot of, people paying money to get their books published, etc. So there was a complete paper chase, but that did not generate new socially relevant knowledge. So in a sense, even though publications increased, but quality did not increase. So what I've been arguing for the last 35 years is that there can be no mechanical yardstick for judging quality in education. It has to be a very sensitive kind of a judgment about quality in education, quality of teachers, quality of researchers. And similarly, when we talk about literacy in schools, we have to redefine literacy because earlier we simply defined literacy as being able to sign, but now literacy has to imply being able to absorb the modern day technology. If we are not able to absorb the modern day technology, then we cannot get a proper job, and therefore poverty would persist. Now, within this, there's a huge role for both public and private education because there's market failure. And whenever there's market failure, public education becomes very important, especially in the context of the pandemic. We saw that there was a huge amount of market failure and large number of children have shifted to public sector schools because the parents cannot afford the fees in the private sector, and so on. So there's widespread market failure, especially for the poor. And, what's also happened is that, there's been a lot of alienation among students. And so for greater social progress, we need to reduce alienation among students, and that requires quality education and commitment of the citizens towards the nation. So what is the situation in India today in which we are operating?
Professor, you should click the slideshow for a full
Hello?
screen.
Were you saying something?
Slideshow, yes, not able to see the full screen.
You're not able to see the full screen.
Yeah,
Okay.
can you click the slideshow? Yes, please. Yes, please. Yeah.
It's better for me because I know what the next slide is. That's why I use it like this. So if it's okay with you, then I'll continue like this.
It's okay, Professor. Please go ahead.
Okay. So what's the situation in India? Education has a democratizing influence, and this was undermined in school education in the 70s, and it has been undermined post the 90s in the universities and colleges, where the poor, the middle class, and the rich would rub shoulders because they would go to similar schools and similar colleges and universities. But that has actually declined with the elite going to elite schools and the elite, in India going abroad for higher education rather than studying in the developing, in the public sector institutions. What has also happened is that we have believed in the last two committee reports that have come in the last 25 years that we can achieve standards by standardization. Now, that's a normal kind of a thing, but in the field of education, we cannot achieve standards by standardization. In fact, they work against the standards when we do standardization. Like, for instance, the UGC proposed in 2000 courses that were standard courses that would be implemented in different universities, but that goes against the autonomy of the teachers, and therefore the commitment of the teachers to the courses declines. So standards in higher education cannot be achieved by standardization. We have to have a different model of how to achieve standards in the country. And what has happened in the Indian context, I've noticed since independence, is that Indian education is dependent on rote learning. And the reason that happened was, in my Indian economy book, I have traced that to Macaulay's impact on our education system. He separated teaching from research. Now, the moment you separate teaching from research, then people simply do teaching and they don't need to do continuous research. And therefore, you can simply reproduce what is existing rather than try and absorb that knowledge and then develop it into a new knowledge. So research is required for development of new knowledge, but if you're only going to pass the old knowledge on to the children, then you don't need to do research. So this is why in India, very little research is being done, and education simply becomes a passport to a job. So, it sort of doesn't help improve the understanding of the children. Teachers typically dictate notes and students copy them and reproduce them. What has also happened is there's overuse of and mechanical use of technology in elite schools. I was trying to, teach economics for a little while, experimenting how to teach better in the school, in my son's school, which is a very elite school in Delhi. And the teachers said, no, please don't do any of this. Just teach them what the coursework is, So what has happened is that in elite schools also, there's overuse of technology, but actually it's simply rote learning that goes on. The students are prepared for exams, and therefore, the absorption doesn't quite take place. And this overuse of technology has weakened the teacher and taught relationship, and teachers are very important for creation of citizenship, and that role is also declined. So technology needs to be very sensitively used. Unfortunately, it is being indiscriminately used. Also, one of the things that has happened is, which is undermining quality in India, is massive malpractices in education. Education, since it is very formalistic, all you need to do is get a degree to be able to get a job. And therefore, absorption of knowledge is not very important. And that's why cheating, capitation fees, reservation for the money, fake degrees, all this has grown in the last 30 years in the Indian context. And with privatization of education, there's a proliferation of illegalities because, the education institutions want to say that their students are doing very well. What has happened is malpractices have proliferated as a result of this kind of a privatization, that is indiscriminate privatization that is going on in the country. The commitment of the rulers is also missing towards education because they send their children abroad or to elite schools. So they don't much care about the normal schools, the government schools, and so on. The Allahabad High Court had passed a judgment at one point of time many years back, saying that the children of the elite should also go to government schools. But what has happened is, because of the commitment of rulers is weak, the commitment to quality education is weakened in the country, because the elite can always send their children abroad to get quality education. So their commitment to quality within the country has weakened. So what we needed was, like the Allahabad High Court said, the concept of neighborhood schools, so that the elite children also go there, and then the elite would worry about education in India. Otherwise, they would not worry about education in India. Now, what has been the impact of the pandemic? As the chair has already mentioned, it has aggravated the poor divide between the rich and the poor. And we have got to see that, we've seen that happening. Dropout has increased because of the economic crisis. The poor people have lost income. They've pulled children out of schools, or they've shifted them to public sector schools. So in a sense, it is highlighting the need for much stronger public sector education in India, much greater resources for public sector education, and much greater commitment. Teachers also have to devise more innovative ways of teaching. Many of my students, PhD students who are teaching in various colleges in Delhi and outside, they have been telling me of how difficult it has been to teach using the online mode, because the children's attention span is very small. So unless you can get their attention on a small screen, they're not with you. And the children have got used to multitasking over the last 15 years with mobile phones and laptops and YouTube and so on. So that many of the teachers are not sure whether the child is actually listening to the lecture or actually doing something else while the laptop is open. Now, in this context, when you're teaching online and getting attention span is difficult, rote learning will not do. So the method of teaching has to completely change. The content also has to change so that the basic concepts go through. Unfortunately, in rote learning, the basic concepts don't go through. So we have to now move to a different kind of curricula, different kind of teaching, so that the content has to change. Exams also, you have no option but to give open book exams. Open book exams have become a default option, but unfortunately, our faculty is not trained to give open book exams. Since I joined JNU in 1984, I've been giving open book exams in my courses that I've taught. And I took a feedback every semester from 84 onward. And the one thing that the students said is, please don't give open book exams because we cannot think in an exam. So my point to them was always that, you have to absorb the basics and apply that. If you can't apply it, that means you haven't absorbed the basics. So open book exams have to be framed very differently than the normal question papers, where we simply see whether they can reproduce the theorems and reproduce what has been taught in the class. This has to go beyond what is the classroom teaching. So my own experience has been that large number of students would not do well, and I had complete sympathy with my students, because for 15 years they've been doing rote learning and reproducing that in the exams. How can they suddenly in one exam suddenly do open book exam and start thinking? So I used to be quite liberal in grading, but the students understood that how the open book exam. So many of my students who are now teaching, I've been telling them to go back to see how the open book exam was done. So this is something that we have to get into our teaching system. Now, there's another thing that has happened, and which is that there's impact of growing marketization on our education system. India has gone through two policy paradigm changes, one in 1947 and the other in 1991. The paradigm change in 1947 was that the national movement understood that the individual is not to blame for his or her problems, whether it be unemployment, poverty, illiteracy, ill health, etc., and that we have to solve this problem collectively. And therefore, the state was given a large role to solve these problems. But in 1991, we turned this policy on its head, and now the individual is to blame for his or her, illiteracy or lack of health facilities and so on. So this policy paradigm change is what I call the marketization of policies. So marketization means that the principles of markets have penetrated into the various social institutions. It's not as if markets did not exist before 1991. So markets have always existed. Even a barter system is a market, where you exchange goods and services. Now in the market, you exchange it for money. But the point is that there's always an exchange that's involved. But marketization, as I said, implies the penetration of the market principles into the social institutions. So what are the market principles that have penetrated into the social institutions, which are also affecting education? Because now for education also, we have to go to the market. So the first principle, as Samuelson in his basic economics textbook said, is that the markets operate on dollar vote. If you have $1, you have one vote. If I have $1 million, I have 1 million votes. So it's not a democratic institution in the sense of politics and political science, that one person, one vote. The second principle on which markets operate is more is better. That means if I have one shirt, a second shirt is better, and so on and so forth. So the dollar vote leads to the marginalization of the marginal. If I don't have purchasing power, I cannot influence the market, and what I want will not happen. Similarly, more is better means consumerism, because the more you consume, the better off you are. And therefore, it has an impact on our environment and on our climate change. The third principle that is used is consumer sovereignty. And then the next principle that is
you have 5 minutes, so we have to have this. Yes, please.
Yeah. So consumer sovereignty implies that whatever the consumer wants, that should happen. So if I have money, I can buy a Mercedes-Benz car, but if I don't have money, I can't buy food, I can't get education. And this all is based on the idea that individuals are rational and they're maximizing their welfare. So the responsibility of the collectivity has been diluted by the market, because it's resulting in atomization of the individuals, and collective action has weakened. Governments have retreated from responsibility to the citizens, and that is impacting our quality in the wider sense of education. So education cannot be treated like other professions. It's not like office work or factory work. We can do time and motion studies. As I said, I can deliver 100 lectures which are all indifferent. So I've done my duty in a mechanical sense, but I've not done my duty in the quality sense, the way education should be. So mechanical systems of measuring output will not work as far as education is concerned. Now, what is the role of policy and the various reports on education? We've had several education reports that have come, whether it be the Kothari Commission or the 1986 report or the new report, and they have proved to be disastrous because they have not delivered. And that's why we keep reiterating and we keep saying the same thing again and again in the various reports. The reason is that the real problems were not identified and the solutions proposed have been mechanical. And why that is so is because these reports have been formulated by people with bureaucratized mindset. There have been politicians, bureaucrats, and even academics who actually behave more like bureaucrats than as academics. So meaningless changes have been suggested, For instance, in 1987, it was suggested that you should have MPhil, you should have academic staff colleges. Academic staff colleges have not upgraded the skills of the teachers. MPhils have not upgraded the skills of the students in terms of research. Then you had PhDs as compulsory. That also did not work because PhDs and MPhils can be done very mechanically. Then we came to the API points, the annual performance index, and that also can be very mechanically fulfilled. That's why I've been arguing the standards cannot be achieved by standardization, because API and all these trying to say that minimum requirements, MPhil and PhD are all, basically based on the idea of standards being achieved by standardization. Now, financing of education is very important because if you want to have quality, you need to finance. Now, whether we spend as a private sector or a public sector, the resources are national. So the question is how much of public and how much of private? That's the only issue. The issue is not that, resources are not available. So allocation of resources to education is basically what indicates the low priority that society has given to education. On public education, we've not exceeded 4% of GDP, whereas Kothari Commission suggested 6%. And globally, you see countries like Malaysia and others spending more than 10% of our GDP on education. Actually, I argue that there's no shortage of resources in the nation because the black economy, which is 62% of GDP, can give 24% of GDP extra. Today, our tax GDP ratio is 17% of GDP. If we had collected enough taxes from the black economy, it would have been 41% of GDP. And then if we had got this extra 24%, we could have allocated 10% of GDP to public education rather than spending less than 4%. Very often we counterpose primary versus tertiary level of education. And in my judgment, this is a false dichotomy. We need to improve both primary and tertiary levels of education. They're interlinked. If we produce good teachers, then we'll have good primary education. If we have good students in primary education with understanding, then our tertiary education will also do better. So the choice should be really between the social waste and education, not between primary and secondary education. Now, to conclude, there is a need for a mindset change about education among the elite. Society does not lack the resources, the issues of priorities. So we have to prioritize higher education, primary education much more than what we have done. Quality is socially determined, it's not an abstraction. And quality would be determined in the context of the socio-economic situation that we are in. Education should not help reproduce existing social structures, but it should advance socially relevant knowledge. And for that, scientific temper and critical reflection are very important. Then rote learning has to be de-emphasized. Teaching and research have to be integrated in our higher education. Without that, it will remain rote learning. And what is rote learning in higher education will become rote learning in primary and secondary level as well. So we have to get out of this dichotomy between teaching and research at the higher education. A status of teacher has to be raised. The remuneration has to be much higher than what it is at the moment so that we attract good talent to the teaching profession. At the moment, it's a secondary choice. A lot of good students, they try for private sector or they try for government jobs, and then feeling that they try and come into education. So they're already, in a sense, feeling inferior to the others. School education has to be high quality everywhere, whether in rural schools or in urban schools. Unfortunately, the ACER reports have been showing that 50% children in the 5th class in rural schools cannot do second class reading, writing, and text, etc. So we have to call for a democratization of the functioning of our education system, where there's equal emphasis on all different kinds of education that is given. Classes for that have to be manageable in size. In other words, the recruitment of teachers has to be greatly increased. And teaching has to improve so that we can eliminate coaching, which only is based on rote learning. The teacher and taught relationship has to be more sensitive, and technology should only be an aid. It should not be a way of displacing teachers. Autonomy in education at all levels is very important. Unfortunately, in the universities, what we've seen is autonomy is given to the vice chancellor, but it doesn't filter down to the lower levels of the individual teachers. And that then undermines the autonomy of the entire education system. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much. A big round of applause for Mr. Arun Kumar. And it was a really, very enriching and very, very informative. And I could just note down a few of the points which I felt were more important. The present perspective. Technology needs to be sensitized. Yes, that's very, very important. And that's what we are all realizing. And absorption doesn't take place. Neighborhood schools, yes, I have myself been talking a lot on it, but that's still a dream. Let's see when it would come. And education, it's not like any other profession. Very true. And primary education and tertiary education should be taken care of at the same level. The second speaker, we have a very eminent speaker, Professor Rajput, the ex-director of the NCERT, and I'm sure everybody sitting in this hall very aware of the NCERT, and those who had or are aspiring for the civil services. That is the set of books which we all read first, and including myself in 1984, sir. That was the set of books we used to get from NCERT in the Nai Sadak, Delhi, to get all the books and really start preparing for the civil services. Sir, I welcome you once again here. And we have Professor Rajput, and sir, please take the floor with us and let's listen to more about your thoughts. Sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'm sorry the whole thing has to be readjusted because the power failed on this side. And this is not an infrequent occurrence. Whenever it happens with me in my lectures, between the lectures, I think of children who are supposed to be learning online and the remote places, difficult places, how are they managing? Sometimes I get very upset when I have to stop my lecture after 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I hope it doesn't happen today. Sir, I'm extremely happy to be part of this whole thing. I have learned my initial lessons in community education from late Sri Ramlal Pari, who was so affectionate to me and had guided me to transition from physics research to education sector. Yes, we have the pandemic. I am supposed to talk about it, its impacts, and these have been discussed in detail. I have heard Professor Arun Kumar and also your initial remarks, and we have talked about numbers. There is much more than numbers. And I think even if Corona is under control, say within next 6 months or 4 months, its impact will continue to haunt us for several years ahead. I have seen the despondency and demoralization amongst young persons, adolescents. What will happen to me afterwards? Those who are getting very high marks, they say 95% and more in CBSE. Earlier it was about 37,000 and now it is more than 70,000, a double of that number. It is a double. Yes, numbers are in abundance available. But these numbers have not brought cheer on the face of the children. We had never established a system of evaluation which could have become an alternative and had generated confidence. We all in education, we have been told, we have been taught, and we have taught that the best evaluation can be done only by the teacher consent, one who teaches. He, the learner and the teacher together can do the best evaluation. But all our education at present, and we have realized it during the pandemic period, is reduced to textbooks, teaching in schools, and examinations. As the director of NCERT, I feel related to every young person who has ever read an NCERT book. But I also hold myself responsible for certain practices which have not been under control. As Professor Arun Kumar mentioned, when I was teaching something to my granddaughter, and I said, no, this should be written like this. She said, no. My teacher had told me it has to be reproduced exactly like the NCERT textbook. The answer must be the same words, same sentences. And I realized, yes, we have done this. Why am I mentioning this? Because quality is the concern now. It is from information society to knowledge society to wisdom society. And therefore, if this transition has to take place, everybody must comprehend what is the meaning of cognitive capital of a country. And this pandemic has definitely impacted the cognitive capital of the country. I can mention a couple of things as assigned to me in my lecture. That home learning, now a lot of consideration is necessary for home learning. What should be the shape of home learning? How could it be stress-free? And how could it really be contributing? Now, disruptions in instruction is worrisome, but disruption in interactions amongst peers with teachers is certainly more worrisome and impacted things more adversely. In countries like ours, in India and other similar conditions, similar economic conditions, the feeding program, the nutrition program, the program for regular programs of vaccination and other aspects which children should get, health checkups, all has been impacted. And so this is the time for institutions and education systems to find out how these things can really be internalized in the system, that if there are tough situations, how do we deal with this? Digital divide is really very big. It has brought a lot of, it has widened the gaps that were already there. Digital learning has already come in before the pandemic came. It became a necessity during the pandemic, but it has accentuated the gap that happens in our case. And all of us know, whatever we might have mentioned in the constitution, whatever policies were mentioned, in India, the education is sharply divided. It is divided from those who can afford financially and those who cannot. Now, this pandemic has created a new situation. In several states, the enrollment in government schools, Sarkari schools are increasing. I have seen the decline over the last 60 years. I have seen the decline of the credibility of government schools. My personal interpretation of the constitutional mandate is that till they attain the age of 14 years, it should have been the total responsibility of the state to give them education. And if the state had accepted that in initial years, there would not have been this gap of haves and have-nots. Instead of doing so, what the state did, it encouraged private entrepreneurs. And as Professor Arun Kumar was mentioning, slowly it became a commerce of education. And this commerce of education is something which is detrimental to the spirit of the Constitution of India. Same quality of education to all, irrespective of any diversities of caste, culture, economic, social, and variations. We have not been able to achieve this. Now the digital divide has told us that this gap is widening. You see, people have done it. Our teachers have come up. They have come with alternatives. They have tried to find out. But yes, not every teacher was proficient in this online teaching. They did not know whether same materials can be used. Some of them used to send. Just they would photocopy and send it on WhatsApp to the child and say, this is digital learning. I have seen it. Children have come to me and we have seen this part. I have talked to the principals and others. But anyway, I should accept that we are moving ahead and we have done a lot on that. But will it be sufficient? Nobody can say. This digital divide will definitely impact our quality of education in future and our intention of giving equality of opportunity to every child. And therefore, this is time. We have a new education policy. This is the time to find out how can we really look after these aspects. And therefore, we have so many webinars. I have attended so many and I have said no to so many. And there are vice chancellors who have told me that in their university, they had more than 700 or 800 webinars. I think there should be some sense of discipline on this. We should get into action. We should develop action plans at every level. every child has to be looked after when he comes to school. First, I should say that lot of preparation necessary to give confidence to parents and children to come to school. Number one, this is necessary. While there are recommendations that children should be brought to schools, if you talk to individual parents, they are very apprehensive. I have talked to at least 1 or 15, 20. They are worried. They say, who will guarantee? Who will guarantee security? But there are other implications also. Staying in home for 18 months, 16 months, or 14 months has resulted into mental agony, emotional agony. And therefore, schools must open. Medical advice must be heeded too, but pre-opening preparation in the schools is a must, and there the work culture has to change. We are accustomed to taking things casually, but can we really transform or bring about an attitudinal transformation amongst those who are supposed to prepare schools for our children? We also have a great opportunity at this time to consider how economic crisis impacts children and their education, and whether our society is really concerned about imparting education to those who are impacted. When I mentioned that a lot of children now shifting to government schools, there is a sad story behind it. People have lost their earnings, they have lost their jobs, and they are not able to do it. My apprehension is that it will affect girls' education more adversely than boys. There are parents who have withdrawn the girl from the school altogether, or shifted from a fee-paying school to a government school. Several things I can go on listing, but I know that time has the limitations. Coming back to quality, and this I mention an anecdote. See, Professor D.S. Kothari was the chairperson of the National Commission on Education, which worked during 64-66 and resulted into 1968 policy on education. That policy on education, policies can make a big difference. I would mention one. It was for the first time, because the vision of Professor Kothari, that science and mathematics were made compulsory for both boys and girls. And it was, I remember, people protested. And they said girls cannot do mathematics and science. But today we know what a great visionary Professor Kothari was and how he could manage it. Millions and millions of girls have been benefited by one policy statement. The point I want to make is the title of the report submitted by Professor Kothari and his commission was Education for National Development. After about 25 years or so, about 88, 89, a query was posed to Professor Kothari, sir, if you become the chairperson again and you are asked to reformulate the policy, what changes will you make? And the learned professor said, yes, I have thought about it. I will change the title of my policy. And the title of my report would be Education for Character Building. And he went ahead to say, I was wrong when I prepared the report under the title Education for Development. He explained further, development could have waited, but preparation of people should not have. If I had focused on character building, we would have today, India would have had young persons committed to the nation, committed to integrity, honesty, committed to human value, with high character, high motivation, high inspiration. Our Bhakra, Nanga, Bhilai and Bokaro would have waited for 10 more years. We would have preferred poverty, doesn't matter. But whatever was being done in public interest would have been number one, grade one, class one. And that is the difference which I would like to mention here. Quality is to be redefined. Quality is encouraging every child in what Gurudev Tagore has said, power of ideas, power of imagination. These are the two boons he had mentioned. Every child gets two boons, power of ideas and power of imagination. But Gurudev also explained, but what we do? In this system of teaching, textbook reproduction in the examination, we are impeding the power of ideas and power of imagination at every moment. Will this change? And if power of ideas and power of imagination is impeded, curiosity is restricted, and therefore creativity is stunted. I think these four terms have to be very clearly understood in the context of quality enhancement of Indian education and in the implementation of the policy. A reference has come to autonomy. Yes, autonomy is essential. In NCERT textbooks, we write that we have prepared these textbooks to set standards for the whole nation. But we would like these textbooks to be written at a state level. A local element of the curriculum must be brought in a country which is of such, with all its diversities. This is very relevant. And therefore, every teacher has to be a curriculum developer. Every teacher has to be a textbook author. He should be able to know how to formulate a good question, how to test these ideas, imagination, curiosity, creativity, from which entrepreneurship and innovations come to the country. There are two other, 4+2. We need entrepreneurship, we need innovations, but that cannot be achieved if you do not focus on permitting full flow of ideas and imagination of this. Quality is comprehension of the global situation and our responsibility. Quality is comprehension of the climate crisis, pollution, social tensions. Quality is comprehension of and finding ways and means how to learn to live together. Quality is lifelong learning. Comprehension of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. These are the factors which will have to be taken. Our education system would have been greatly strengthened and could still be strengthened if at this particular juncture with things will change and change drastically. We could recall what Mahatma Gandhi had taught us. The 3x3 matrix: head, hand, and heart, self, society, and nature, body, mind, and spirit. There can be no better articulation of our objectives, goals of education than these terms, 3 into 3 I see. When I visited these schools in China, my first reaction was, I think they have accepted basic education of Mahatma Gandhi without saying it so. Every school had this focus on working with the hands, social contract, and so many other things. But this today we see what is the impact how China is reaching this particularly. One of the things that I think India can take a lead is, we are all talking about sustainable development goals. And we have committed to this. We have the SDG 4, about which a lot of talk is going on. It should be going on. But can we forget that our children must be well familiar of the trusteeship principle which Gandhiji has told us? Can we forget that Gandhiji has said that nature has sufficient resources to meet the need of everybody, but not the greed of anybody? We can't. We have not brought these things into our education system, and that is why I say our total focus has shifted to more marks, and more marks. The result is our children, brilliant children, excellent young person, are forced to go to a coaching institute, stay there for 2 years, 3 years, and then appear in competitions in areas which they do not like. I have seen in several countries talent being nurtured by serious observation of the liking of the children in primary schools, making record of this, encouraging them. And then after about 7 or 8 years in a school, sending these children who are brilliant in a particular area to schools that specialize in those areas. I visited a physics school in one of the country, and they said they will show me a physics school. What is a physics school? They will also take you to a music school. In these schools, children learn every total curriculum as such, but special attention is paid to music or physics or whatever other subject. That is how you nurture talent. That is what we need to consider at this stage if we can do. In the pandemic days, I was also thinking on several occasions that our system, traditional system, was based upon Adhyan, Manan, Chintan, Upyog. These are the 4 steps which every teacher should know. Adhyan, all of us know, you have textbooks, you have teacher, you have classroom lectures. Manan, think about it. Let every child sit after the lecture for 5 minutes and think about it, what I have heard. We never do it in the school. It's not a part of our pedagogy. And after I came to know of this, it impacted me. And the third is Chintan. Talk to somebody. Talk to your friend. Peer learning, we can say roughly. And then application. Why should I learn something which I do not know how useful it would be, how it will help me, how it will help me growing up, how I will be able to utilize it at some stage? These are the aspects that we must put into this. This sustainable development goals we have in India, an answer to this climate crisis and pollution, other things, aparigraha. We never talk about aparigraha. We never talk about sustainable consumption, which is a part of our tradition and culture. And therefore, my submission would be that the implementation of the new education policy, and if you have to enhance quality, let us make a one sentence statement. Education in India would be rooted to culture, committed to progress. We will be aware of our traditional system of knowledge creation, knowledge generation, knowledge utilization. We shall be open to new ideas from everywhere, as Gandhi ji has said, that I will keep my windows and doors open, but nothing should blow away my house. That type of situation is necessary. And I think in the end, let me take 2-3 minutes to talk about teachers. Quality is teachers. Gunnar Myrdal wrote in 1970 in his book, The Asian Drama, that for these developing countries, which have recently been liberated, and that treatise of Gunnar Myrdal was discussed worldwide. He said, teacher education institutions are the power plants, are the ocean of quality for these countries. Quality would flow from teacher education institutions to the lowest point, to the initial beginning point, and from there you would generate people who will go to different professions, but will be men of commitment, character, and concern. There was a committee headed by Justice J.S. Verma, former Chief Justice of India, in 2012, and it gave a report that 10,000, let me repeat, 10,000 teacher education institutions in the country are selling degrees. And this has been repeated in the National Education Policy 2020, which also states that these would be weeded out. For 8 years, they have not been weeded out. Now, if each one of them is producing 100 teachers per year, 1 year B.Ed, now 10,000 into 100 into 8, have so many teachers pursue the degrees. Can you enhance quality if you do not recruit teachers in the approved numbers? In a state like UP and Bihar, there have been more than 1 lakh or 2 lakh vacant positions of teachers. You appoint teachers on a small salary because of bureaucratic recommendation and save money, and you have no idea what damage is being done to the cognitive capital of India. These are the things which have to be seriously thought, not only by the government. Let us not be dependent on only the systems and the governments. People have to come up. The civil society, the learned ones, the knowledgeable ones must also come up and say that this is our plan. This is how quality can be enhanced. And we keep it put up wherever it needs to be put up. Quality has to be. Now we have to go to certain things. India can teach people a lot of things because we are proud of them. Aparigraha is something which can help. Gandhiji's sentence, which I just now repeated, can guide us. It is character, it is human values, it is work culture. This is how I give the example of Japan, one of the most devastated nations after this World War II. How did they rise? I was very keen to study it. And whatever I could understand was they depended upon their teachers and schools. They had a long-term planning. And if you depend on teachers, hard work, and whatever you do for the country, that is that type of national concern and feeling is internalized. And that can come only when you are familiar of our culture, you are able to understand what are the culture traditions you can still hold on and how they can be revitalized in the incoming context. I mentioned Dr. Kothari's name. If he could envision this, our policy at this stage in the pandemic situation, when we have gone through a horrifying period, our children have suffered, our teachers have suffered. Yes, everybody is ready for a change, and let us have a very positive impact of this change by transforming the system to quality, character, commitment. That I think my time is over. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajput. It was a very, very enlightening session and lots of learning were there. Particularly when you said quality must flow from the teachers. That was the excellent part of it. And then we're talking about sustainable development, and you talked about character building and the sustainable consumption. And that also is a very, very important thing that we need to really take it forward now from onwards. And let's see how we really work on it. The Gandhian trusteeship concept. I mean, we've been talking about so many other social issues, and every time we go back to Gandhi and we keep remembering and how alive he is with us even today. I will now like to open this session to the House, and we have chance for only 3 questions. Otherwise, you will eat your lunchtime here itself, and I don't mind that. So, the first question, thank you, Arun, Professor Arun, to be back with us. And please introduce yourself, one word, 2 words, your organization, and the question you are addressing to. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, everyone, both our speakers and our moderator for the session today. We are very thankful to all of you for enlightening us with your wonderful, amazing experience on the particular topic. I am Apurva from Vishwa Yuva Kendra, Delhi. My question is for Professor Arun Kumar, sir. Sir, could you please throw some light on how academia and CSOs can be instrumental in terms of mainstreaming vocational training or vocational education to the needy or unprivileged, with specific reference to our new education policy 2020. Thank you, sir.
So this is for Professor Arun Kumar, who is a regular visiting faculty at the Vishwa Yuva Kendra. Yes, sir, please. Mr. Arun Kumar, can you hear us?
Yes, but should we collect the questions and then answer?
No,
It'll save time.
No, we just got time for 2-3 questions. And so
let's collect the questions.
One by one, yes. Please. Would you like to repeat your question?
Yes.
No. I was saying let's collect the questions and we can answer all at the end.
So the other question, okay, if you want that to happen. The second question, yes.
My question is from Rajput sir. First of all, a very good afternoon to our speakers and the moderator, of course. Thank you so much, sir. It's a privilege to hear from both the speakers while whether it's on virtual platform or at Kendra. So Rajput sir, I just want to ask you is about like we all see, there is a privatization and marketization of education these days. as we see, everyone is using digital platform for teaching. So it seems to be very attractive to all the kids because they also want to choose these platform because their friends are choosing this. So how could we encourage our basic school education importance instead of this app-based Byju's, Vedantu's teaching, which is basically in trend these days? And how could we bridge the gap between the basic concept of teaching? Like you said, we can use that Adhyan Manan Chintan, because only a teacher, a leader, a role model can teach these concept of teaching in terms of interaction in spite of this app-based education. So can you please brief about this? Thank you so much. I'm Mukta from Vishwa Yoga Kendra.
Can we have another question from some other organization if they want to ask? Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Shilpa from Indian Institute of Youth Welfare. It's an NGO working for 45 years in the rural India. So my question is pertaining to the rural education, sir. It's we have observed a lot of dropouts, especially the girl children and even the boy children, the boy student. So is our policy really inclusive to take care of these dropouts or the illiterates? And how comprehensive are they today? And what is the new policy 2020 talks about for these things? So my question relates to what Vishwa Yuva Kendra asked, is how the vocational education is merged with the new policies, and what are your options to go ahead with it? Thank you so much. Thank you, moderator, sir.
Thank you. Should we wind here? I have one observation, sir, if you would allow me as a moderator here. We have experienced in the last 2 years a new trend, a new paradigm shifting to the digital, which was a compulsion for all of us. So what would you suggest? I'm a part of it. Some points from here, can we take it forward to the national policy of education, which we would finally be coming forward with a document, I suppose. So that's my observation. Were there something good in this present scenario, which we can take it forward in our policy matters? So we have 4 questions and one more. No, Vishwa Kendra, enough. No, some other organization is there. We have only 10 minutes to answer. I don't mind sitting here for 10 more minutes, but you eat your lunchtime. That's it. So to begin with, Professor Arun Kumar, we start from your side, sir.
Okay, so thank you for the questions. Now, this idea that we will be able to do vocational training, my idea is that, it should not be separated. If we have a good school education, then that would automatically also include vocational training of some kind, and it should not have to come separately. And children who do not want to go into higher education would actually be able to go into vocational training. And if you have the present system where, the teachers in the universities, in academia are also not able to do other than rote learning, they're also not able to teach outside of rote learning, then I think this kind of interaction would not help. So, as I was saying, basically we have separated the teaching from research in higher education. And that's why all the kind of problems are coming of rote learning and so on and so forth. So unless we reintegrate teaching with research in our universities, in our academic circles, in our colleges, I think the problem will remain. And what happens is we mechanically think about it because we're not offering enough, jobs at different levels. So we think of vocationalizing our education. If the job creation was more dynamic, and especially I would say, in our micro sector, if you think about it, I've been writing on it quite a bit. We have 6,000 large companies, 6 lakh small and medium companies, and 6 crore, micro units. And it's the micro units that employ 97.5% of the workforce of the MSME sector. So it's the micro sector that has to become dynamic. And in the micro sector, what happens is that vocational training happens automatically because children are learning from their parents, whatever vocation they're doing, wherever they're going. Now, if primary education was good, then, on-the-job learning would also be good. Unfortunately, our industry is saying that, our trained engineers and doctors are not up to the mark. in fact, people have gone to the extent of saying that they are unemployable. You know, large number of students who are coming out of our engineering institutions and, you know, doctors and so on. And as we know, Vyapam and for fake degree certificates and so on, all that, you know. So in other words, the skill levels are low, and the skill levels are low because our primary education, secondary education is very poor. And that is poor because our higher education is also very poor. So this is the interlinkage that I was saying. And quality therefore requires us to look at the socio-economic situation of the country. We cannot define quality independent of the socio-economic situation. If the socio-economic situation is very bleak, then of course the quality would also be low. And you know, this idea that we can, you know, make teachers better by, you know, like for instance, I studied in St. Stephen's College for my physics BSc, and there we used to have moral science classes, you know, once a week, and hardly 3-4 of us used to go and attend that. But the point is that you see St. Stephen's students coming out, even though there was a moral science class, it's not that I can say that, you know, their moral sense was much greater than that of other students who did not have the moral science. So moral science, you know, comes, morality comes, and, you know, better commitment comes more out of seeing what is happening in society. For instance, what our leadership is doing. You know, if the leadership is indulging in corruption and black economy, then, you know, the example that is being set to everybody else is very different. And that's why you see large number of school teachers are committed more to tuitions than to actually good classroom teaching. Now, that is because of the situation the teachers find themselves in. The teachers find themselves that, you know, the people don't want to be teachers. You know, it's a second or a third option, except for women who would like to come into school teaching. So school teaching has to be made the first option. And for that, we have to create the socioeconomic conditions before that happens. So I think vocational training would also become good. Academic teaching also would become good if we did that. And for that, you know, society has to give a role to the teachers. You know, that role that teachers used to have in the 40s and 50s, that has slowly disappeared. Now it's becoming more commercialized. Everything is money based. You know, students feel that, you know, they are paying the money to the teacher and the teacher is giving them a service. Now, when you make it so mechanical, then the quality and the consciousness of the teachers changes, you know, and they also begin to think of education not as a noble profession, but they also begin to think of it as a profession where they're earning money for their sustenance. So in other words, you know, whether we think of rural education, whether we think of vocational education, these are some of the socio-economic parameters on which we have to work. And finally, I would say this process of marketization. The process of marketization has increased commercialization because more is better. And if more is better, then, you know, consumerism is bound to take place, and then consumerism enters our thinking. Then we are always thinking about how to get our next car, next television sets, etc., rather than thinking about the quality of education that we are imparting to the children. So more is better. And as I said, the other is the dollar vote. And the dollar vote implies that, you know, we have as many votes as the amount of money. So therefore, we move away into materialistic conception rather than, you know, the conception of teaching and research being, you know, important social commitments. So I think we have to inculcate social commitment, and that's where our leadership has been very weak. Gandhi was never followed. You know, Gandhi's Nai Talim. Gandhi, what he said about Nai Talim, that was never followed. There are few Gandhian institutions that have talked about it, but in our schools, we don't think about it. So commitment to work, commitment to working with our hand is very weak. And that's why our elite classes don't want to work with hand. When I was doing my PhD in Princeton University, every student in the graduate college used to know how to fix the car, you know, the basic things in the car rather than go. But in India, people don't want to change tire. They don't want to change a bulb. You know, they get a laborer to come from outside. So this attitude towards labor has to also change. This attitude towards knowledge also has to change. And with rote learning, you'll never have, you know, a curiosity being cultivated. So curiosity is not being cultivated in our children because it's all rote learning. You mechanically, you know, mug it up and reproduce in the class and then forget it. So, you know, I think we need basic reform, and unfortunately that has not happened.
There was a question for Professor Rajput. Please.
I think it was referring to the privatization and commercialization. A lot has been said about it. I am amongst those who, as I mentioned, I would have liked the state to have sponsored the basic primary education for the first 8 years. and that would have checked commercialization. Commercialization in education in Indian context must be checked. But now I have grave apprehensions because most of the decision makers are also associated in one way or the other. As the chairperson of the National Council for Teacher Education, at its inception, I have gone through it and I have seen how the teacher provision systems have been, in fact, invaded by the entrepreneurs. And this type of thing requires a lot of bold action and initiatives which have to be taken. Yes. The second point I would like to make is, we use the term Acharya. The first hero, icon of the child as he goes to school is the teacher. And he tries to copy everything. Our cricketers and film stars come only later on. And by the time this young person, this young adolescent realizes how they are putting things before him, how materialistic pursuits have overtaken people at the highest level of popularity. When they take a few crores and tell every child to consume pan masala or the bhujia, I am pained as a teacher. And I want people to speak out. If I had the resources, I would have spoken about it. But I don't have that popularity, I think. But as teachers, this is our responsibility. So the acharan of the adhyapak will make all the difference. Ye hame yaad rakhna chahiye. There are a lot of things that can be said which are positive in the policy. For example, my personal experience as the principal of the Regional Institute of Education in Bhopal for about 11 years is that if a child in the school learns to prepare certain things, his whole attitude changes and he would prefer to go to some production or some entrepreneurship instead of going to Kota and get some coaching. That would happen because now the vocational education and academic education, as we used to call it earlier, have been merged. And this merging, if implemented properly with comprehension, would make a big difference in the. It has the potential of bringing about an attitudinal transformation amongst young persons. It could be one of the things. I also think that this amount of flexibility that is around, that you can read physics and philosophy, or you can complete your first year in undergraduate classes and then after 2 years come back and do it in the second year if you like or not. I think it will help a lot. It will give a lot of liberty, some sense of no suffocation, no bindings. And that makes a big difference when the child is growing up, when the young person is growing up. And you see, the system, as Professor Arun Kumar mentioned, Mahajano and Gatasap, people observe what is happening all around. I can tell you, 40 years ago, I could talk about value education with confidence to a group of student teachers. Today, I feel hesitant to talk about it because they look at each other and they know what is happening outside. I would mention one example. What type of respect I had for the way our parliament used to function when I was 19-year-old. And what level of respect now a person has got who is 19-year-old and who witnesses the parliament proceedings every day. We must speak out these things. As teachers, we must discuss these things. As young persons, we must find out why we should not see that our systems improve in the positive direction. Yes, there is no better way than education and educators. And therefore, I say the quality for the whole country in every profession flows from the teacher education institutions and teacher educators. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. But I feel, I still feel we can, I don't want to deprive Thomas and Ajit from a session, and we have Dr. Adil also. We will extend this session for another 5 to 7 minutes because these eminent professors will not be with us for, may not get an opportunity to listen to you, sir. So we have, sir, if you would permit, 2-3 questions more, and I would like Dr. Adil to speak and or ask your question. and then Ajit, and then lastly Thomas. Oh, Mayank, and okay, if time permits, Mayank Upadhyay ji. Okay, if your questions have been answered, then fine. Otherwise, fine. So we have 3 questions, please. I think it's very interesting. So I just wanted to extend this session for 5-7 minutes. Please carry on.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. So it's very good that, you know, teaching is a very noble profession, and the teachers need to really take care about how they teach their students.
आवाज ठीक नहीं है, आवाज कम है.
Hi. So is it possible to have a student-centric educational system in which the focus is on enhancing human agency so that students can identify and realize their own potentials? Because I mean, right now what we see is that education in India is very feudal in nature. I mean, teachers from the primary to the higher level behave in a very feudal manner. I mean, it's like, this is my view, and if a student is supposed to, wants to criticize a teacher, it's not really very well taken. And so, I mean, although it's a noble profession and the teachers should be very well respected, but can the focus of education be on strengthening human agency so that, because the way I see education is, it's like raw material, you know, you give somebody the raw material, and what the person does with that raw material, how he uses those educational resources to develop his career, to contribute to the society, is what is very important. So I may have a PhD, but what do I do with that PhD is very important. And for that, strengthening of human agency is very critical. And innovation, again, you know, in the commercial sphere, innovation is something that flows out of it. So is it possible, is it realistic to have such a situation in India where, you know, education contributes to strengthening of human agency? Thank you.
The next question, Thomas, please keep your question very short and brief. You want to ask something? Okay. I think we'll have lunch tomorrow then.
Good evening, sir. My name is Thomas. I'm from Vishwa Yuva Kendra. Sir, my one question, and there is a doubt as well. In India, we are always talking about quality education. But in India, I think the need is more of education than quality education. And how much, rather than using the word quality education in India, is it not value education that is needed, which is the need of the hour? Because quality education is maybe for a section of the society who is already empowered and who has to go to a next level. So for them, quality education means a lot. But for a country like India, where if you see extreme south, where education is literacy to the highest, and when you come to the north, where the literacy is the lowest, how can we say quality education can be spread everywhere? So isn't it not more important that we have value education, which can be spread equally every part of the country? That's my question, sir.
Talesh, आप अपना प्रश्न बहुत छोटा रखेंगे.
हेलो, सॉरी, थैंक यू सर. गुड आफ्टरनून. मेरा नाम शैलेश सिंह और मैं क्रीड संस्थान लखनऊ से हूँ. मेरा बस एक छोटा सा प्रश्न है कि अभी हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कहा कि आपदा में अवसर, तो हमारी जो गवर्नमेंट संस्थाएं हैं, गवर्नमेंट स्कूल हैं, ये किस तरीके से ले रही हैं? क्योंकि अभी हम गांव में जब काम कर रहे हैं तो हम देख रहे हैं कि जो प्राइवेट सेक्टर्स में काम करने वाले लोग थे, कोविड के दौरान उनकी नौकरियां जाने की वजह से उनके जो बच्चे थे वो मूव कर रहे हैं गवर्नमेंट स्कूल की तरफ. तो क्या गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स, गवर्नमेंट टीचर या पॉलिसी कुछ ऐसी शिक्षा उन्हें दे सकती है कि आने वाले समय में वापस जब उन लोगों को नौकरी मिले तो वो दोबारा से मूव ना करें प्राइवेट स्कूल में, वो अपने बच्चों को वापस गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में ही पढ़ाएं? जो आज से लेके हम लोग कल बात कर रहे थे कि हमारे यहाँ जितने भी बच्चे हैं शिक्षा लेने के बाद वापस विदेश जाते हैं, कहीं और अपना जो इनपुट्स हैं वो दे रहे होते हैं, तो जो बेसिक शिक्षा है, जो बेसिक वैल्यूज हैं, वो हमारी गवर्नमेंट स्कूल से निकल के आते हैं. तो ऐसा कुछ कर सकते हैं पॉलिसी में कि जो हमारे बच्चे हैं वो टिके रहें गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में, वहां से वो बेसिक शिक्षा लें?
बहुत अच्छा प्रश्न है और ये बहुत चिंता का विषय भी है. लास्ट क्वेश्चन प्लीज. नाउ आई एम ट्राइंग टू क्लोज इट. मयंक भाई. हो गया time? Okay, he's the bigger organizer. I'm just a small session organizer, so I have to listen to him. So please, Professor Arun Kumar and then Professor Rajput.
So since time is very short, I'll reply in a very brief. First point is the teachers are very feudal, and that is bound to be the case if you are only teaching mechanically, because then you don't want to question, you don't want to have questions because you themselves, don't have an answer to what the child is asking. You don't have the patience to actually do that. So therefore, in a very mechanical kind of teaching, it would be like that, and the interest of the student would not be taken care of. So, when a PhD is done very mechanically, it doesn't imply that, there's anything new in the research that has been done, and therefore the PhD does not mean very much. So as I said, there's a paper chase. Large number of PhDs and MPhils are of very, very poor quality. There's actually nothing very original. And also there's a lot of plagiarism that's taking place. Even in an institution like JNU, when I was teaching till 2015, we were worried about plagiarism, and the students were simply copying because they wanted to get a PhD quickly. So the tough teachers who would want some originality, very few PhD and MPhil students would come to them. They would go to other teachers who would simply pass the dissertations mechanically. So in other words, PhDs, etc., also will not have much in them, and therefore innovation. When it's all mechanically taught, absorption is not there, then how would innovation come? So in other words, that's why I said democratization of teaching is absolutely essential. Rote learning has to be done away with. Teaching and research has to be integrated, and that's why I suggested some of the things. The second point was about, quality and quantity have to be separated because we need a lot more education. I don't see this dichotomy. If you have good teachers, you'll have both quality and quantity simultaneously. It's not that you have to have mechanical teaching, which is worthless, so that you can call yourself literate. We need to have not only literacy, but also meaningful literacy, where the child will be able to absorb knowledge, etc. So quality and quantity will go together, provided we reform our education system, provided we bring teaching and research together so that rote learning goes away. Once the rote learning goes away, whoever is learning will learn well. So then you can expand your teaching and research. The third question was about, the government schools and need to strengthen it. Of course, there's a need to strengthen, as Mr. Rajput was saying, the government schools need to be very good. Why have the government schools deteriorated in quality? And that's because, the classrooms are very large. That's why one of the recommendations I made was classrooms have to be smaller, far more teachers have to be recruited. And also what you need to do is pay the teachers much more than what you're paying so that the first-rate students begin to think of teaching as a career. Teaching today is not a first option. In 1986-7, I did a survey of the families living around my home. That was the time we had a 1-month strike of all universities in the country. And that time I realized that the first priority of a male child is to go into the corporate sector or into the IS. The second would to be a clerk. And the third priority was to become a teacher. So teaching had taken a very low priority way back from the 70s and 80s because it was not seen something which was supposed to be good. So we need to change this. And for that, government schools have to take the lead. The government has to take a lead. Our expenditure on the public education has to go up so that the teachers' salaries can go up and a lot more teachers can be recruited. So government schools have to be strengthened. There's no option. And that's what the pandemic has taught us.
Professor Rajput, you'd like to add something or should I?
Yes. मैं तीनों पर बोलना चाहता हूँ. पहला जो ह्यूमन एजेंसी का मैं समझ पाया, उसका उत्तर मेरा ये है कि दूसरी एजेंसी ढूंढने की जरूरत नहीं. If you can prepare teachers who understand the basic element of the Sri Aurobindo's philosophy on education, I will mention 2 points of it. One was the mind must be consulted in its own development. That is to understand the child. Is the teacher trained enough to understand the child? If that happens, everything would be there on the right path. The second one, and most important, nothing can be taught. And if a teacher really realizes the implication of nothing can be taught, then he will become a partner, he will be a helper, he will be a co-worker, he will be a co-learner, and the nurturing and nourishing of the talent would abound. Therefore, focus on the teacher. And an example, in Finland, they say after the school, the most sought after competitive examination is not for administrative services, but for entry into teacher education courses. Because there, whatever be the condition, the things, the only VIP category is teachers. This, I leave it there. The second point, I think it would not be a correct perception to say that quality is required only for higher education. This thinking comes because of our mindset that anybody who scores more marks is more qualified. No, sir, not necessary. Anybody who has grown up in totality, in personality, maybe more talented, I would say is more talented. And therefore, it is here that we have to, the lower education is more important because these are the people who will constitute the society. One example, in Israel, every person who completes a school education or a certain level of education, which is compulsory, is taught basic principles of nursing. If somebody is sick, how do you look after him? Geriatric care, and everyone has to go to military training. Everyone has to go to this training also. This we do not know, many of us do not know. Now, if in villages somebody studies for 5 years, 6 years, or 10 years, suppose up to high school, and then he goes to agriculture or whatever he does, if his quality is good, the quality of the nation as a whole is good in education, and therefore, please do not confuse that only higher education should be taught in terms of quality. No, sir. The third point, आपदा में अवसर, बड़ा अच्छा वाक्य लगता है, लेकिन उपयोग में नहीं आता है। मेरा तो दृढ़ विश्वास है, और मैं बहुत सालों से बात कहता हूं, कि जो इलाहाबाद हाई कोर्ट ने कहा था, या जो सैद्धांतिक रूप से नेबरहुड स्कूल का कॉन्सेप्ट है, वो अपने में इतना सुदृढ़ है कि वो समाज में परिवर्तन कर सकता है। और कहीं न कहीं, कभी न कभी कोई ऐसा निर्णय अवश्य होगा इस समाज में जब नेबरहुड स्कूल पर हम जाएंगे। आज जब सरकारी स्कूलों में बच्चे आ रहे हैं, अगर सरकारें थोड़ा सा सजग हो जाएं, समाज का सहयोग लें और उन स्कूलों की स्थिति सुधार दें, तो जो निजी स्कूलों में बढ़ता हुआ एक्सप्लॉयटेशन है, शोषण है, वो कम हो जाएगा। क्योंकि आपने देखा होगा पिछले 4-5 सालों में निजी स्कूलों के प्रति आक्रोश बढ़ा है, देश के अन्य विभिन्न भागों में बढ़ा है, क्योंकि वो स्वच्छंद हो गए, और स्वच्छंदता शिक्षा में कभी भी स्वीकार नहीं हो सकती है। इसलिए ये बहुत बड़ा अवसर है इस आपदा में कि सरकारी स्कूलों की जो साख है, और मैं कहता हूँ वो 1960 के स्तर पर ले आइए। मुझे वो स्तर याद है कि सबसे अच्छा स्कूल सरकारी स्कूल होता था, और वहां का अध्यापक जानता था कि समाज मेरा सम्मान करता है, मेरा स्कूल सबसे अच्छा है। और आज भी अगर अध्यापक के अंदर ये बात भर दी जाए और सरकारें सहयोग करें, तो निश्चित रूप से ये हो जहाँ सही अनुपात में होना चाहिए, टीचर टॉट रेशियो सही होना चाहिए, आवश्यक सुविधाएं होनी चाहिए, और जो वातावरण स्कूल में बनता है उसे बनाने का अधिकार अध्यापक को या हेड टीचर को होना चाहिए। बहुत बड़ी संभावनाएं हैं, हम लोगों को जितना संभव है इस बात को बार बार कहना है। धन्यवाद।
Thank you very much. That was a very, very enlightening session. Yes. मैं अब आप दोनों की बात और प्रश्नों के जो जवाब आए हैं उसमें आगे कुछ नहीं कहना चाहूँगा। Thank you. I can only say thank you, and it has been really very enriching for me also, because a lot of points came forward that I also keep talking about, and you're endorsing it and you're supporting it gives me also a lot of strength. So this was a really rare opportunity to listen to Professor Arun Kumar and Professor Rajput, both of you. Thank you very much on behalf of CAST, on behalf of the ISA and the the Vikas Trust. Yes. So thank you all, audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you to the organizers for inviting.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, you want to say something, Professor Rajput?
No, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Just, I'll not delay your lunch further. Just a couple of questions. One is